A stepson blackmails his stepmom, threatening to reveal her affair if she doesn't meet his demands. The Robbie family included Ryan, a successful 45-year-old investment banker who loved his Brooks Brothers suits, his second wife Mandy, a stunning 38-year-old interior designer with a taste for the dramatic, and Ryan's son from his first marriage, Nathaniel, a 20-year-old college dropout with a history of minor legal troubles. To everyone around them, the Robbies looked like they were living the perfect American dream. Ryan was excelling in his career. Mandy's interior design business was becoming a hit with the elite in Oakdale, and Nathaniel seemed to be getting his life together working at a local garage. But underneath this polished exterior, there were hidden conflicts, jealousies, and dangerous wishes. Ryan's first marriage to Helena, Nathaniel's mother, started passionately, but turned bitter quickly. Helena, a carefree artist, felt restricted by Ryan's conservative lifestyle and high standards. Their arguments, once quiet, grew into loud disputes that filled their house, frightening young Nathaniel. The divorce was lengthy and harsh. Helena tried to get full custody by describing Ryan as distant and uncaring. In the end, they were granted joint custody, but the process was damaging. Nathaniel, only 10 at the time, found himself caught between his fighting parents, unsure of where his loyalty should lie. Helena's move to the West Coast for her art career left Nathaniel feeling abandoned, nurturing a resentment that lingered for years. After the divorce, Ryan poured himself into his job, climbing the career ladder relentlessly. 3 years post-divorce, at a charity gala, Ryan met Mandy Rossi. Mandy captivated Ryan with her raven hair and sharp mind, a refreshing change in his conventional world. Mandy saw Ryan not just as a source of financial stability, but as her chance for the stable family life she never had, having grown up in foster care. Their romance progressed quickly, and within a year, Mandy moved into the Robbie home. Nathaniel, now 14 and dealing with teenage challenges, was wary of his new stepmother. His initial coldness towards Mandy's attempts to bond escalated to outright hostility. Over time, the gap between Nathaniel and Mandy widened. Ryan, preferring to avoid conflict, ignored the growing tension, hoping it would resolve over time. Mandy, upset by her failed attempts to connect with Nathaniel, focused more on her thriving design career and new social opportunities. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's teenage years were filled with skipping school, experimenting with drugs and petty theft, which only increased the distance between him and his father, often putting Mandy in a difficult position. By the time Nathaniel reluctantly started at the local community college, their home had become a minefield of unspoken problems and deep-seated resentment, setting the stage for dramatic future events. The tipping point came one hot July afternoon. Nathaniel, who had quit college and was working as a mechanic, came home early, hungover and irritable. The house was unusually quiet. Ryan was away on business, and Mandy was likely at a client's. Looking for aspirin in the master bedroom, a place he usually avoided, he heard a buzzing sound. It was Mandy's phone, lighting up with a new message on the nightstand. Driven by curiosity or perhaps spite, Nathaniel reached for the phone. Nathaniel's eyes widened as he saw the message preview on the lock screen. "Can't wait to see you later, my love. Axer." His stepmother's phone was locked, but this single message opened a floodgate of secrets. Sitting on his parents' bed, Nathaniel forgot his headache as more messages arrived, each more revealing than the last. He discovered the sender was Xavier Krasinski, a name he faintly recognized as one of Mandy's clients. The messages described a secret, passionate affair that had been ongoing for months, with talks of hidden meetings, passionate moments, and future plans together. A mix of emotions overwhelmed Nathaniel: disgust at Mandy's betrayal, a perverse satisfaction in having something to use against the stepmother he had long disliked, and a sense of opportunity. When Mandy came home that evening, she found Nathaniel in the kitchen, wearing a sly smirk. The air thick with tension, he casually asked about her day, his eyes gleaming with the secret he held. Mandy, sensing something was wrong, replied with caution, unaware her world was about to collapse. Nathaniel quickly revealed his knowledge, casually dropping Xavier's name and watching Mandy's face lose color. He relished her reactions as he detailed her affair, enjoying each flinch and gasp. Mandy's initial denials turned into desperate pleas as Nathaniel laid out his demand: $1,000 a month for his silence. Nathaniel, who had always resented Mandy, now saw a way to profit from her mistake. Mandy tried to appeal to his sense of family and the damage this could cause, but Nathaniel was unyielding. He coldly pointed out that she was the one who had endangered their family with her actions. He was just taking advantage of her error. The negotiation was tense. Mandy tried to lower the amount, but Nathaniel stood firm. Ultimately, faced with losing her marriage, social standing, and her public image, Mandy gave in. Mandy agreed to Nathaniel's demands, her voice empty as she promised the first payment would come the next day. As Nathaniel walked away from the kitchen, he felt a surge of power. For the first time in years, he had the upper hand, and he planned to use it fully. Mandy was left alone, her mind spinning with the weight of her situation. The first payment was made in cash, discreetly handed over in a plain envelope in the garage, away from any curious eyes. Nathaniel counted the bills slowly, enjoying Mandy's unease. With a smirk, he reminded her that this was just the start. Soon after, a new dynamic emerged in the Robbie household. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Ryan was still consumed by his work, unaware of the tension at home. But beneath the calm exterior, stress was building. Mandy became cautious, her confident style replaced by nervous looks and fake smiles. Nathaniel, feeling empowered, started treating her with open disdain, knowing she was too afraid to confront him. As the summer ended, the burden of her secret and the stress of meeting Nathaniel's demands began to wear Mandy down. She didn't realize that this was just the beginning of a worsening nightmare. Over time, the delicate balance in their home started to fall apart. Nathaniel, drunk on power, increased his demands. The monthly payments, which once made him feel clever, now seemed small compared to the influence he had over Mandy's life. It began with mean comments at dinner and subtle threats made to look like harmless chat. He would drop Xavier's name in front of Ryan, watching Mandy panic before swiftly changing the topic. He took pleasure in her fear, noticing her trembling hands as she poured wine and the dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. By October, Nathaniel's initial demand wasn't enough. He confronted Mandy in the laundry room, demanding an increase to $1,500 a month. When Mandy protested, explaining the difficulty of hiding the withdrawals from Ryan, Nathaniel's gaze turned cold. He reminded her of the intimate photos on her phone, photos that were never meant for him to see, and how easily he could send them to Ryan. Mandy's life was falling apart. The stress of her hidden relationship with Xavier, combined with Nathaniel's increasing blackmail, was overwhelming her. Her design business started to decline as she missed meetings and her work quality dropped. Clients, once captivated by her energy, now complained about her distracted nature and lack of creativity. As autumn continued, Nathaniel's control grew. He started acting like he owned the house, throwing parties while Ryan was away on business trips, leaving Mandy to clean up. He even took Ryan's prized vintage car without asking, returning it with unexplained dents and scratches. Mandy could only respond with silence to each of Nathaniel's bold moves. The power balance in the house had completely shifted. Nathaniel was in charge, and Mandy, driven by desperation, complied with his every demand. She was walking a tightrope, trying to satisfy Nathaniel while keeping up appearances for Ryan. As Thanksgiving neared, signaling family gatherings and more eyes on their lives, Mandy knew she couldn't keep this up. She was filled with dread and realized she needed help. In early December, she decided to take action that would change everything. After much deliberation, Mandy confided in Xavier about the blackmail. They met at a nondescript motel on the town's edge, their usual secret spot. As Mandy shared her distressing story, her voice breaking with emotion, Xavier's face turned from shock to a cold, calculating anger that frightened Mandy. What Mandy didn't realize was that Xavier Krasinski was more than just the successful businessman and charming lover she knew. Beneath his polished surface, he had a dark past with connections to violence and crime. Xavier had spent time in prison for aggravated assault, had ties with local organized crime, and was known for solving problems ruthlessly. As Xavier listened to Mandy's dilemma, he saw it not just as a threat to their relationship, but as a danger that needed to be removed. He calmly assured Mandy he would handle everything, his soothing tone contrasting with the steely look in his eyes. Mandy, desperate and trusting, felt a huge relief wash over her. She thought she could finally pass her burden onto someone else. In the days that followed, Xavier began to implement his plan. He contacted old associates to learn about Nathaniel's routines, workplace, and favorite spots. Xavier was thorough, leaving nothing to chance. Mandy didn't know that Xavier had no plans to negotiate with Nathaniel or buy his silence. In Xavier's world, problems were eliminated permanently, and he was willing to accept any collateral damage. As Oakdale began to decorate for Christmas, Xavier made his move. He approached Nathaniel casually outside the garage where he worked, friendly on the surface but with a cold gaze. Their conversation was short but tense, filled with unspoken threats. Xavier made it clear he knew about the blackmail and warned Nathaniel he was in dangerous waters. Nathaniel, empowered by years of bitterness and a newfound sense of control, wasn't intimidated. He mocked Xavier, hinting that Ryan might like to know about his wife's affair. As Xavier walked away, losing his composed facade and showing a glimpse of real anger, it was clear the conflict had escalated far beyond mere money or secrets. The situation had become a high-stakes game. The situation had escalated into a battle of wills with potentially deadly stakes. The week before Christmas, Xavier decided to take a more direct approach. His previous warning had been ignored by Nathaniel, and he knew Mandy was on the edge. Pretending to invite Nathaniel for pre-holiday drinks, Xavier lured him to a secluded spot near the old mill on the outskirts of town. The air was crisp that winter evening. Xavier offered Nathaniel $50,000 to leave town and never contact Mandy again, hoping this generous sum would resolve the situation without further trouble. But Nathaniel, confident from months of manipulating Mandy, dismissed the offer. With bold arrogance, he demanded $250,000, threatening to reveal everything about Mandy and Xavier to Ryan and the whole community if they didn't comply. What followed was sudden and violent. Losing patience, Xavier struck with quick, fierce blows that took Nathaniel by surprise. The fight was short but intense. Xavier's combat skills and ruthlessness quickly subdued Nathaniel, leaving him injured and bleeding on the cold ground. As Nathaniel lay there, experiencing real fear and pain for the first time, Xavier issued a final ultimatum. This was Nathaniel's last chance to walk away and forget everything. Next time, Xavier warned, there would be no more offers, only dire consequences. Bruised and shocked, Nathaniel made his way home that night, the gravity of his situation finally sinking in. He was out of his depth, caught in a dangerous game he hadn't fully understood. Alone in his room, as he tended to his wounds, Nathaniel thought about fleeing. But as his injuries turned to anger, his determination only grew. Far from being scared off, the attack reinforced his resolve to see this conflict through to whatever end might come. As Christmas came near, the tension inside the Robbie household was palpable. Mandy, already pushed to her limits, now had to deal with Nathaniel's increasing demands and his unpredictable behavior. His bruises from the altercation with Xavier had healed, but his anger had only deepened. Ryan, unable to ignore the tension any longer, started to probe more deeply. The cracks in Mandy's carefully constructed facade were becoming visible, and she struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy. The situation reached a climax on Christmas Eve, during their annual holiday party, filled with festive sounds and cheerful chatter. Mandy, wearing a beautiful dress, moved gracefully among the guests, her smile not quite masking the worry in her eyes. Nathaniel, distant and brooding, nursed a whiskey in the corner, eyeing his stepmother with open disdain. As the night progressed and alcohol lowered inhibitions, Nathaniel's temper flared. Seizing a moment of impulse, he approached Mandy while she conversed with Ryan's colleagues. He whispered a demand for another $5,000 by week's end. Mandy, maintaining her composure, attempted to reason with him quietly. Unable to hold back, she quickly pulled Nathaniel aside into the study. In the privacy of the study, Mandy released months of pent-up fear and frustration. In quiet but firm tones, she informed Nathaniel she was done with the payments. She couldn't and wouldn't continue. He could reveal everything to Ryan if he wished. She expressed her exhaustion from living under the constant threat of his blackmail. Surprised by her bold defiance, Nathaniel lashed out verbally, threatening to destroy her reputation, her marriage, and her entire life. He stormed out, leaving Mandy shaken yet strangely liberated. She had finally stood up to him, ready to accept whatever might come. Something had to change, and quickly. With trembling hands, Mandy grabbed her phone and sent a text to Xavier. "We need to talk. It's urgent." January 15th arrived, cold and gray, setting the stage for the impending tragedy. Since Christmas, Mandy had been living in a state of constant anxiety, startled by every sound and flinching whenever Nathaniel entered the room. Her conversation with Xavier was short but intense. He had listened to her desperate pleas with an impassive expression and simply responded, "I'll take care of it." Initially comforting, these words now haunted her, the ambiguity of his promise filling her with fear. Nathaniel had been unusually subdued since their Christmas Eve confrontation, seemingly uncertain about his next move after Mandy had called his bluff. This uncertainty only intensified the oppressive tension at home. That evening, as Ryan worked late again, Mandy sat in the living room, distractedly flipping through a magazine, her thoughts elsewhere. The sound of Nathaniel's car in the driveway tensed her up. She heard the front door open, his footsteps in the hall, then silence. Upstairs, Nathaniel had resolved to end the charade. Tomorrow, he decided, he would tell his father everything and let the consequences unfold. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice the soft footsteps nearing his door. The unexpected knock jolted him. Expecting Mandy, he opened the door with a sneer, but it vanished instantly at the sight of Xavier's stern face. What followed was a swift and brutal confrontation that lasted only minutes, but would echo for years. Xavier barged into the room, shutting the door behind him. There were words, threats, pleas, and frantic bargaining, but Xavier was not there to talk. Nathaniel was caught off guard by the first punch, knocking him back against his desk. Nathaniel fought back, his youth and desperation giving him some advantage, but Xavier's experience and chilling resolve were overwhelming. The confrontation was intense, but quick. Downstairs, Mandy heard the muffled thuds of the struggle, her heart pounding. She stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, torn between intervening and the paralysis of fear. Part of her knew she should act, call for help, do something. Yet another part, worn down by months of blackmail and torment, kept her immobile. The ensuing silence was suffocating. With shaky legs, Mandy ascended the stairs. She found Xavier at Nathaniel's doorway, his shirt stained with blood, his eyes devoid of emotion. Behind him, she glimpsed Nathaniel's motionless form and barely stifled a scream. Xavier's voice was unnervingly calm as he led her back downstairs, speaking of accidents, self-defense, and necessary evils. Mandy could hear his words but couldn't truly grasp them. Her mind was haunted by the image of Nathaniel's lifeless body and the crushing guilt of her role in the tragedy. As Xavier methodically began to erase the evidence, Mandy sat numb in the kitchen, realizing her life had irreversibly changed. The hours after Nathaniel's death blurred into a frenzy of precise action and cold planning, with Xavier employing skills from his criminal past to take control. In shock, Mandy mechanically followed Xavier's directives. They meticulously cleaned the room, eliminating any sign of the struggle and Xavier's involvement. Nathaniel's body was concealed in a tarp from the garage and loaded into the trunk of Xavier's car under the night's cover. As dawn approached, Xavier drove off with a grave determination, leaving Mandy alone to face the day. When Ryan returned that morning, exhausted from work, Mandy managed a brittle smile. The day passed in a surreal routine of cooking, cleaning, and small talk with Ryan, while inside, Mandy was overwhelmed by the horror of what had transpired. When Ryan casually inquired about Nathaniel's whereabouts, Mandy quickly replied that he had mentioned going on a road trip with some friends. As days turned into weeks, Mandy's deception became more intricate. She created a digital trail by sending emails from Nathaniel's account to Ryan, fabricating tales of adventures in various cities. She also handled concerned calls from Nathaniel's workplace, concocting stories of family emergencies and extended leaves. Meanwhile, Xavier had disposed of Nathaniel's body in an abandoned quarry, weighing it down to prevent discovery. He also took great care to eliminate any evidence that could tie them to Nathaniel's disappearance. Initially, their hasty cover-up seemed effective. Life in Oakdale continued with only minor murmurs about Nathaniel's extended absence. However, as winter turned to spring and Nathaniel's silence persisted, the questions began to accumulate. Ryan's indifference shifted to worry, and then to suspicion. Mandy found herself entangled in an increasingly complex and fragile web of lies, sensing it was only a matter of time before it all came undone. Detective Sandra Sloan, with 15 years at the Oakdale Police Department, had dealt with many missing persons cases, but Nathaniel Robbie's disappearance struck her as odd from the start. The circumstances, the abrupt departure, the sporadic updates, the absence of financial transactions, didn't add up. As spring unfolded, Detective Sloan delved deeper into the Robbie family's dynamics, interviewing friends, colleagues, and neighbors, and uncovering a home filled with underlying tension. The more she uncovered, the more her suspicions intensified. Ryan Robbie, initially hesitant to involve the police, found his trust in Mandy's stories waning and became a vocal proponent for intensifying the search for his son. This shift, along with Detective Sloan's dogged pursuit of the truth, began to unravel Mandy's carefully crafted facade. The case broke open in late April, when a co-worker of Nathaniel's from the garage came forward with critical information. He remembered overhearing a heated argument between Nathaniel and Mandy just before Christmas, involving money and threats. This testimony shifted the focus of the entire investigation. Detective Sloan brought Mandy in for questioning, subjecting her to hours of intense interrogation. Worn down by months of guilt and fear, Mandy began to show cracks in her facade. Her story, once coherent, now had glaring inconsistencies. She mixed up dates, contradicted her previous statements, and became visibly distressed when questioned about her relationship with Nathaniel. Sensing a breakthrough, Detective Sloan decided to gamble by bluffing about evidence they didn't actually have. She mentioned phone records indicating frequent contacts with an unknown number around the time of Nathaniel's disappearance, hinting at Xavier's involvement. The strategy worked. Believing the police had more information than they really did, Mandy collapsed under the pressure. She tearfully confessed to the affair, the blackmail, and her awareness of Nathaniel's ultimate fate. She portrayed herself as a coerced participant in Xavier's actions. With Mandy's confession, the investigation escalated dramatically. An APB was issued for Xavier Krasinski, and search teams were dispatched to the quarry where Nathaniel's body was suspected to be hidden. As the news of the confession spread, Oakdale was shaken by the revelations. The seemingly perfect family on Maple Street had been hiding more sinister secrets than anyone could have imagined. In the aftermath of Mandy's confession, Oakdale turned into a hub of media activity. News vans crowded Maple Street, and reporters scrambled for any details about the scandal that had stunned the quiet suburb. Detective Sloan, leading a newly formed task force, was determined to ensure justice was served for all involved. Thanks to Detective Sloan's adept coordination with state and federal authorities, Xavier was captured at a bus station in Nevada while trying to flee to Mexico. His arrest added the final piece to the puzzle. Under relentless interrogation, Xavier eventually confirmed much of Mandy's account. Though he tried to depict himself as a man pushed to the brink by love, he disclosed the location of crucial evidence, including the murder weapon and some of Nathaniel's personal belongings that he had kept as a grim souvenir. As the full scope of the conspiracy was uncovered, the repercussions were profound. Ryan Robbie, faced with the harsh reality of his wife's betrayal and his son's murder, withdrew from public life. Friends said he became a shadow of his former self, shattered by the profound betrayal by the two people he had trusted the most. Meanwhile, the Oakdale community, which had prided itself on its safe, wholesome image, was forced to face the dark reality that had lurked beneath its surface. For Detective Sloan, solving the case was a bittersweet victory. Although she was proud of her role in exposing the tangled web of deception and ensuring justice was served, she was haunted by the thought that quicker action on her part might have saved a young man's life. Ultimately, justice was delivered, but it offered little solace to those most affected. Xavier, with his history of violence and direct involvement in Nathaniel's death, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mandy, who tried to present herself as a coerced participant, was convicted of conspiracy and being an accessory to murder. She received a 25-year sentence with eligibility for parole after 15 years. Ryan Robbie, irrevocably broken, sold the family home and left Oakdale. Unable to endure the reminders of his loss and betrayal, he moved to another state to live quietly, seeking privacy to mourn and perhaps to start anew. The case left a lasting impact on Oakdale, shifting its identity from a low-crime, family-oriented community to one marked by its association with a notorious crime. Don't forget to make your mark on this story. Hit that like button if you found the unfolding drama captivating, subscribe for more gripping tales, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Did justice truly prevail? What would you have done differently? Let's discuss and dive deeper into this mystery together. Remember, your interaction helps us bring more thrilling stories to light. Join our community and stay tuned for the next exciting episode.